Let me get this show on the road. Well, good evening, everybody. And my name's Brenda Generali. Nice to meet all of you. I am going to be talking about the benefits of iridology tonight. A couple of you we've been talking have already been involved with iridology, and some of you are completely new to iridology. So what I have here is I'm going to do a little PowerPoint presentation for you and go through this and talk a little bit about the benefits of iridology. And if you have questions, go ahead and ask questions. I'm happy to answer your questions. Okay, so once again, my name is Brenda Generali. I'm the President and CEO of Joyful Living Services. This year, I was managed to get Joyful Living Services sanctioned and accredited by the International Iridology Practitioners Association, so I'm very excited about that. I am a comprehensive...
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a lot of work. I am a comprehensive iridology instructor for IPA, the International Iridology Practitioners Association, certified nutritional consultant, American Association of Nutritional Consultants, and so on. Taken many classes over the years, but there's not enough room to list everything. So that's my website, joyfullivingservices.com. My email, if you need to reach me, is iridology@netzero.net, and there's my telephone number. Best way to reach me is Facebook chat, which I think I've talked to all of you, and I'm usually available to talk on Facebook or email or the phone. So let me just give you a little bit of info about myself. Since I'm talking about the benefits of iridology, I am a really great example of the benefits of it because in 1983, I had my own health problems. And at the time, I was seeing someone who had a girlfriend that was suffering with endometriosis. So she had a lot of pain every month and, you know, had a lot of problems. And she was seeing an iridologist in the Bay Area and was having good results. So I was having incredible digestive problems. I was under a lot of stress. I had all kinds of problems at the time, digestive problems and stress problems. And so she told me, why don't you go ahead and see the iridologist? So I tried to make an appointment. He was too busy, but I managed to see Chris, who's now up in Washington. Saw him, and he looked at my eyes, and he told me all these things that I needed to do, and I did everything he said, and I got better. So then...
I'm putting that right there on top. So you'll have to watch it when you kick down.
Then what I did is I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. And if you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, so I sent a lot of my friends to him because I wanted to see how it would work. They got results, and one day I called and I asked how I could learn more about iridology. And Chris led me down to Bernard Jensen, who was down in Escondido at the time. So I took his class, fell in love with iridology, got certified by Dr. Jensen in 1989, and the next week I had my first client. And have seen clients ever since. This picture here, down here at the bottom, is me at his 100th birthday celebration down in Escondido. He needed volunteers to take pictures of all the people that, came to his celebration. And I sat there all hours and took pictures of eyes after eyes after eyes after eyes. So that was a long time ago. Anyway, my main mission has always been to help others improve their health through iridology. 2018, I became a member of IPA and became, like I said, a certified comprehensive iridologist, and Joyful Living is now sanctioned. And I really want to write an iridology book. So I've been putting a lot of information together, and that is something that I think the next thing I'm going to do is create a chart. One of my students sent this to me, and I have to put it in here because it's so cute, you know, with all of these pupils here who are saying, "Good morning, Miss Iris." And the teacher, "Good morning, pupils." And I don't know if you think that's funny, but to me, this is hilarious. Anything having to do with eyeballs. I can sit there and look at eyes all day long. So let me tell you a little bit about eyes. We used to believe that there were only two color eyes, blue and brown. And that's what Dr. Jensen taught, that there were only two color eyes, blue and brown. And that hazel and green are a combination of the two. So as we've continued research over the years, we have determined that there are actually three different colors of eyes. And I talked about this in my last little presentation last month. If you missed it and you want to watch it, let me know and I'll send you the link, because they're all free. All my little webinars are free. But we have now determined that there are three color irises: blue, mixed, and brown. The difference is that the blue iris, we call that a lymphatic iris. And if you follow along in my Facebook group, you will see me make comments for everyone. Just usually little comments, you know, maybe about the color or maybe about a subtype. So the blue iris we call lymphatic. And these eyes, these type of people tend to have drainage problems relating to kidneys, lymph, and mucous membranes. Okay, then we call this here a mixed iris because it is a combination of the blue and the brown. Usually somebody in the family has blue eyes. It might be a grandmother, it might be a grandfather, it could be a parent or a great-grandparent. Usually somebody has blue and somebody has brown. And so we get this mixed color. You can see that it's not blue, and you can see that really it's not true brown. A true brown eye kind of looks just velvety. It's just all brown and it looks like velvet. And a blue eye, you can see all of these fibers all over the place. You can see white in here. You can see these nice fibers. You can see all kinds of things in a blue eye. And then here we have a mixed eye that you can see it's darker in the center, has kind of orange and brown colorations. And this is what we call a mixed eye. A mixed eye, these people tend to have more digestive issues. Okay, they tend to have more inherent weakness in the digestion. So that would be the colon and the stomach and the liver and the pancreas. Okay, all the digestive, everything having to do with digestion. A brown, this is called hematogenic. A brown iris is called a hematogenic iris. And these people tend to have more silent pathology, such as high blood pressure, blood sugar issues, blood anemia, and bowel issues. Now, that doesn't mean that a mixed-eyed person can't have high blood pressure or bowel issues or blood sugar issues. It doesn't mean that a blue-eyed person can have blood pressure issues or blood sugar issues or any of the same thing. It just means that we're looking at tendencies. And this is really how iridology has changed as we've continued doing research. We're noticing these tendencies. So rather than using the eye to diagnose, which we don't do because it is illegal, you know, it's not only illegal in Florida, but it is illegal to diagnose without being a medical doctor. It is illegal to diagnose. So we can't diagnose disease or dis-ease, as Dr. Jensen used to say, from the eyes. And why would we anyway? We're not doctors. So we simply can talk about genetic tendencies, okay? And so here we have a really nice blue eye. This is actually my son's eye. And I use his eye as a really great example because it is such a beautiful eye. You can see all the fibers in here, and we can see all these markings. And in iridology, we look at all of these. We look at the pretty whites, we look at the wiggly fibers, we look at the rings. There can be many different rings in the eyes. We look at any kind of pigments, any yellows and oranges and brown colorations. We look at things that look dark, you know, anything that looks like a hole, anything that, you know, any of these markings, they all mean different things in iridology. And so these people, these blue eye it can look blue, blue-gray, or it can look blue-green. Okay, and we can see various colors of pigments in a blue eye. So they are predominantly blue, but with high-powered magnification, we can see a lot of other types of colors in here. Common reaction sites would be things like tonsils and adenoids and upper respiratory, lungs, sinuses, those kinds of things. So a lot of times a blue-eyed person would be very mucousy, okay? And so we'd want to keep them away from a mucus-forming diet, so things like dairy and wheat and things like that, okay? Because they tend to be more mucousy. A mixed-eyed person, these are my eyes. And what I mentioned at the beginning when I was talking about myself, I said that when I got into iridology, I had a lot of digestive problems and a lot of stress. I was dating at the time, and those of you that have dated, you know how stressful dating can be, unless you loved it, but dating for me was very challenging. And and then I had a lot of digestion problems. Well, a mixed-eyed person tends to have a lot of digestion issues, okay? Liver, gallbladder, pancreas, gastrointestinal. They can have things like constipation and diarrhea, you know, back and forth, blood sugar highs and lows. So all those kinds of things, liver, gallbladder. And so we see a lot of that in this mixed eye, especially where we see the browns and the oranges. We see that in a mixed eye. And stress we can see here in these rings, all of these rings. And, you know, we count the rings, we see how many there are, we see how white they are or how dark they are. This means different things. So these rings here, and if you look at my eye, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have like 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are genetic and they don't go away. The only thing that happens is that the eye looks like it changes. I'll explain that to you later, but they don't actually go away because they are genetic. And if you look at my parents' eyes, both of my parents have the same rings, and they both have this mixed eye. Now, I do have a grandmother that had blue eyes, and I had a great grandfather that had brown eyes. So that is where the mixed eye comes from. And in iridology, we're not only looking at ourselves, we can look at up to 5 generations. So ourselves, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and our great-great-grandparents. And with that, all of their health, you know, their strengths, their weaknesses, all of their genetic tendencies come with them, right? It comes to the next generation, the next generation, the next generation. And so we are kind of gathering, I guess you could say we're gathering, and also their emotions, unresolved emotions and things. You know, iridology can tell us so many things. So here is that hematogenic iris. And we can just, when you look at it, you can see, you can't really see any fibers. You don't see any beautiful white lines in here. You don't see any fibers going out from the pupil out to the perimeter. You do see some of these rings, these stress rings, but you don't see any yellows or browns, other than just the whole iris kind of looks like velvet. And so that is how we can tell a true brown eye. And so these people tend to have, like I said, imbalance in blood composition, tend to have problems storing essential minerals, potentials for constriction and hardening of the lymph, gastrointestinal tract disturbances, and so on. And these are just tendencies. Just because we see something in the eye doesn't necessarily mean that there is a problem. So what is iridology? Iridology is the study of the color and the structure of the iris of the eye as it relates to the genetic predisposition and health of the body systems. Okay, so it's studying the color and the structure of the eye as it relates to genetic predisposition. So basically, by looking at the iris and looking at the color and looking at the structure, we can see those genetic predispositions. And the great thing about that is once you know what your genetic predispositions are, you know what your color is, you know what your structure is, you know what your predispositions are, then you know what you should and shouldn't eat, you know, what you should and shouldn't drink, how much exercise you should get types of foods you should stay away from, type of climate you could live in, you know, so many things you can learn about your body so that you can live comfortably in your body rather than expect your body to listen to you and what you want to do. It's listen to your body and learn what your body needs. So how is iridology used? So by looking at the iris of the eye, we can see these genetic tendencies, and by learning about your genetic tendencies, you can, like I just said, learn what to eat, drink, exercise, supplements, lifestyle, and anything else to help you live comfortably in your body. It doesn't name any diseases, so we can't look at your eye and say, oh, I think you have cancer. You know, we can look at your eye and say, maybe you better have a test, right? We can look at your eye and say, there's a genetic tendency in the lung reaction field, so maybe you shouldn't smoke. Okay, but we can't say you got kidney stones, or you know you've got we can't say any of those things. You know, I don't even really like to say it because it's not something that we say. You know, it's not something we can do, and you can get a lot of trouble. You can get a lot of trouble for naming diseases and diagnosing people. So we've got to be careful with that. So one of the benefits of iridology is what it can show us. It can show us inherent strengths and deficiencies of organs, glands, and tissues. Okay, it can show us a potential ability of an organ to react to illness. It can show us familiar patterns of various syndromes and pathologies, and certain foods that a person could have difficulty digesting or utilizing. Okay, it can also show us areas of the spine that may have subluxation, and that is by looking at the pupil. So in iridology, we don't only look at the iris, we look at everything. Okay, so we look at the iris, we look at the pupil, we look at the shape of the pupil, we look at how small the pupil is, how large the pupil is, if it's irregular, if you've got one larger than the other. We look at all kinds of things. We look at the sclera, the white part of the eye. So, you know, we look at a lot of things. We can see potential central and autonomic nervous system imbalance, potential circulatory disturbances, which I see that all the time, you know, so having to do with high blood pressure or low blood pressure or cholesterol or, you know, many different things. Potential connective tissue weaknesses, okay, potential for glandular deficiencies, potential for high uric acid levels, serum cholesterol, which I mentioned, and lymphatic congestion. Okay, and a really important thing to note about iridology is what it cannot show, okay, because iridology can't show us everything. And a lot of it has to do with diagnosing, okay? So it can't diagnose or give the name of any disease a person may have or have had, and we can't identify pathology. I mean, if that's something that you want or somebody else wants from you, then they need to be sent to a lab, or they need to be sent to a doctor for a diagnosis, you know, not to an iridologist. We don't diagnose. We can't determine if a person has had surgery or precise blood pressure levels. There you go. You need to do, you know, take your blood pressure reading to find out what your blood pressure levels are. If a person has parasites, we can see the potential for parasites, but we can't say based on the eye, yes, you definitely have parasites, okay? And indicate the presence of yeast infections, we can say, it looks like there might be too much sugar, you know, maybe there's a candida problem, so then we can then do further tests to find out if there's candida and too much sugar, which can lead to yeast infections and possibility of parasites. So there are ways to work with these things. We can't say that a person has a virus or there's germ life or they have a bacterial invasion. We can't determine if a woman is pregnant or has had an abortion. We can see markings in the female organs, but we can't say, oh, yes, you're pregnant just from looking at the eyes. That requires more, you know, more testing. We can't tell if there's a tumor or what size it may be. We can see some of those tendencies in the sclera. All right, we can see that there may be a possible what we call encapsulation, and then that person would need to go find out. Okay, they need to go have some tests, and then, but iridology cannot say yes for sure there's a tumor. Okay, that we just can't do that. Show whether or not a person has kidney stones or gallstones. This is all diagnosing. We just cannot diagnose. We don't do that. Give exact cholesterol and uric acid levels. That needs to be done through a blood test. Determine whether or not there's hemorrhage, where it's located, and unless it's actually located in the sclera where we can see it, then we can't see that. Show if there's arteries are blocked or hardened, though we can see some potentials, okay, in the sclera. And the sclera, if you didn't know, the sclera is the white part of your eye. That is the white part. And we can't distinguish gender or age of a person, predict a person's lifespan or impending time of death, things like that. So those are all no-nos. We can't tell whether or not a person needs surgery. We cannot locate a specific tooth that may be a problem, or if a person's ingested poison or been bitten by a poisonous snake or spider. You know, we can't do that through the eyes. We just can't. So the key is that we just don't diagnose. That's it. We don't diagnose. And there are people that still like to use that word, diagnose, and you may see it in the Iridology Facebook group once in a while. And when somebody brings up that word, I always stop them right away, because we do not diagnose. We don't use iridology as a diagnostic tool. We analyze, we assess predispositions and genetic inheritance. That is what we do. And by doing that, we can see a lot in the eye. Now, when we look at the eyes, it's important to, and those of you that are already involved with iridology that are watching this, it's very important to look at the eyes with reverence, honor, and respect. Because when you are looking at somebody's eyes, you're looking at their, you're looking inside. You're looking at more than just their eyes. You're looking at more than just their health. You're looking at them. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul. And so when we do iridology, we're not only looking at it from a physical aspect, but we're also looking at it from emotional aspect and from personality aspect and also behavioral aspects. Iridology is not just about looking at the eye for 5 minutes. It's extremely detailed. There's a lot of information that you can determine by looking at the eyes. And so you're really looking at a person very deeply when you're looking at their eyes. IPA, we're very careful, we're very dedicated and very concerned with whoever that we work with. And it's an organization that I belong to that I'm really glad that I got involved with IPA, because there's a lot of respect there. Okay, so let me talk a little bit. I just wanted to bring this up because I find it so interesting. The history of iridology. Most of us think of iridology, we think of Dr. Jensen. But iridology is in Australia, in China, in Egypt, Greece, India, Italy, Europe, and America. And it's rooted in ancient history and ancient cultures. It's an ancient practice which dates back more than 3,000 years in China, Egypt, and India, where it was first used to study the iris and its relation to the organs and systems of the body. And as science evolves, we need to really keep pace and keep up with the changes. So just like any science, iridology changes. So I put this here because I was amazed when I went and did some research on the history of iridology. What I found was that it was even around during King Tut. So in 1922, an archaeologist named Howard Carter discovered silver plates while exploring King Tut's tomb. And it's thought that the silver plates are some of the first lessons of iridology dating back thousands of years in Egypt. So if you didn't know that, there's a little bit of history about iridology. And if you love history, which I have a lot of students that love history, you can go and you can research iridology, and you can learn so much about the history of iridology and where it's come from. So after this, then iridology spread from Africa to Babylon, Tibet, China, Europe, and other areas. So this is not going to be a history lesson. I do have that available if anybody's interested. But most of us that have heard about iridology have heard about Ignaz von Pessley. And he was a Hungarian physician. He's known as the father of the Western iridology. And the story with Ignaz von Pessley is that an owl got stuck in his tree. He tried to free the owl, and when he freed the owl's leg broke. And he noticed this line form in the bottom part of the eye, of the iris. This happens to be down here, this happens to be the leg area. And supposedly this owl stuck around, and as the owl healed, he noticed white lines form in that area, which were then believed to be healing lines. Now, unfortunately, nobody has been able to replicate this in a wild bird, and therefore the iridology community is questioning whether or not this actually really happened. However, he did publish a book called Discoveries in the Field of Natural Science and Medicine, a guide to the study and diagnosis from the eye. And we have used his charts and use his information as we continue to research. So research just continues on, you know, it just continues on. Here is Dr. Jensen, and he was wonderful. I was so lucky and so blessed to be able to go down to his ranch in Escondido and study with him. And, you know, he used to say, everything is wonderful. And, you know, everything is wonderful. And then pretty soon you're saying everything is wonderful. And you think of him, when I think of him, I think of how wonderful he was. You know, he was just really an amazing man. Very humble, just a really, really amazing man. And he wrote the book called The Science and Practice of Iridology, and volume 2. And so most of us, when we think of iridology, we think of Dr. Bernard Jensen, and he is the one that brought iridology to the United States. So a lot of iridologists stop there. They stop with Dr. Jensen. You know, they stop with him, and they don't want to look forward. They don't want to look into the future as to what else could be out there. You know, there's so much more research to be done. And we're using all of these people, Ignaz von Pessley and Dr. Jensen and all these other people before them. You know, it's all kind of like a stepping stone where we're learning and we're continuing to research, and we're finding out more things that are going on. So what we're doing now is we've learned that there are 3 styles of iridology in North America. There's Jensonian, okay, which is Dr. Jensen. There's Rayid, which is emotional iridology, and Denny Johnson teaches emotional iridology. If you're interested in iridology, I suggest learning Rayid as well, because not only will you learn the physical iridology, but you'll also learn the emotional iridology. And under all physical ailments, there's always an emotional connection. So learning the emotional is very powerful. And then Jim Burgess, he teaches behavioral iridology. And that's amazing as well, because then you get into personality and behaviors, and you know, if you're going to see clients, you can really help people so much by learning more about their emotions and their personalities and their behaviors, as well as, you know, and what's causing various issues and so on, and for yourself as well. Okay, and we also have constitutional iridology. That is what I teach. Constitutional iridology originated with Joseph Deck and others, used by MDs in Italy, Germany, and Russia as a screening tool. I wish we'd use it here in the United States, but we can't. There are many correlative medical studies being done, and this teaches that the eyes are a reflection of genetic or inherent structure of the body, and that they really don't change. They're really not transitional at all. They're what we call accumulative. so that the eyes do not give us answer, but they tell us what questions to ask. And the iris and the sclera changes may continue to be visible with time, revealing areas that need support. And also that we need background information. So we have intake forms that we use when we see clients, so that analyses are not done what we call cold. This is just a little bit of information on IPA. And IPA, it was founded for the purpose of increasing and communicating knowledge concerning the art and science of iridology, and to provide a forum for the exchange of information and research with the goal of promoting excellent international iridology standards. So this is one of the conferences, and I'm back here. Oh, there I am. I'm right there. This is one of the conferences that we had. IPA is an organization that does all the certifications. They do all the testing and the certifications. They're a really great organization to be involved in, because they hold very high standards for iridologists. They also provide a lot of learning. So every month there are webinars that you can learn, and you know, it's a very supportive environment. We all work together and support each other, and we're all researching. So we're all researching, and these people are in all different parts of the world, all different countries, doing research with their own clients and coming together and sharing that information and furthering the research in iridology, which I think is very important. These are some links and some people that you can learn from. Ellen Tart, she's continuing on the research from Dr. Jensen. Denny Johnson does RAID. David Pesic, he has the International College of Iridology, and he usually holds a congress in October, but I don't think it's going to happen this year because of COVID. Tony Miller, she's in Australia. She's got integrated iridology. You can look up IPA iridologists on the IPA website. Jim Vergas, like I said, does behavioral iridology. There's emotional iridology courses, and Mercedes Colburn, who I actually just had as a guest in my iridology class yesterday, she talks about canine, feline, and equine iridology. So iridology is not only for humans, but it's also for our pets and our horses. She's been studying for years animals and helping them through iridology. And she's in Salinas, California, and she works with animals. So there are many, many things that you can learn with iridology. This is the chart that we use. And just to kind of go over it really quickly, iridology is just like your body. So if you think of your body, in the center of your body, you have your digestive system. This is the stomach. The left eye shows the left side of the body, and the right eye, just so you know, shows the right side of the body. Here in the center, we have the stomach, and around that we have the colon. So we have the small intestines. This is the left side, and the right side, the small intestines come down. Cecum comes across. We have the ascending colon. Transverse goes all the way across. Descending comes over here on the left, and it comes out. If you think about your body, think about the top. The top is your head, right? Your head. Well, this is the brain here. This is the brain up here. At the top, this is the sinuses here. Down at the bottom, think about your body. You have your legs, your knees, okay, your thighs, your groin, your feet. Okay, this is the left hip and knee and foot, leg. This is the right one. Think about your skin. Okay, your skin is on the outside of your body. Well, here it is, this blue ring here. This is the skin. It's on the outside of the iris. Everything else is in between. So this here, this is the spine. At the top is the atlas. At the bottom is the tailbone. And we can see all of the different areas. These are all called reaction fields. So we can see the kidneys and the adrenals. We can see the liver and the pancreas and the thyroid. And you can see this is all brain here, and this is the face area, the throat, the upper back, the lower back, pelvis, abdomen. This is the chest. These are the lungs here, and the breast here, the heart, and here we have the gallbladder, and so on. And wherever we see any of these markings, lines, spots, colors, anything, circles, any of these rings, oops, any of these rings, depending on where they are on the chart, this can tell us where there may be potential genetic tendencies that somebody needs to work on, where an area maybe might not be absorbing nutrients very well or releasing toxins really well, okay, where something may be causing a problem that might need to be checked out, or what might be causing a symptom that might need to be checked out. So, you know, this is the chart that we use, and this is Dr. Jensen's chart. And then Ellen Jensen, she revised it. What she did is she put all the coloring in here, which makes it really easy to use. She added abbreviations and zones and so on. So when we look at the eyes, we look at them in many different ways. And I teach all this in my classes. So I was going to talk about that a little bit. But I was going to show you a few of the common iris signs. These are very common. And next time you look in the mirror or you watch TV, if you look in the mirror, you can look and see if you have some of these signs. Next time you watch TV and you see a model putting on makeup, or somebody gets really close, you know, and the camera gets really close to their face, and you'll look at their eye. And after this, you won't look at their eye the same anymore because you will have learned a couple of things from me. So here we have what's called a circulatory ring. It's this blue ring that is on the outside of the iris. So this is the iris here, this is the pupil here in the center, and this white part, this is called the sclera. And so in the iris, we look at, like I said, the size and the shape of the pupil. We look at the iris, all of these markings, these yellows and blues and dark areas and light areas. And then we also look at all these blood vessels out here in the sclera. So we can see a lot of information about about someone from all these. But this ring is on the outside of the iris. It's right on the outside. I made this little snippet here and enlarged it so you can see. This is called a circulatory ring, and it has to do with circulation. It has to do with possible circulatory deficiency in the body. Okay, so cold hands and cold feet. If you know anyone that has cold hands and cold feet, or if you know anybody that has numbing and tingling in their feet or in their hands, this can be an indication that they may have cold hands and cold feet, or they may have numbing, things like that. So here are those lovely, there's my eye again. This may be the other one that I put up. Here we have what are called contraction pearls. We don't call them stress rings. We're getting away from using any kind of term, a medical term, or any kind of a term that is a symptom. Okay, we're trying to get everybody to use the terms that explain how it functions. Okay, this is what's called a contraction furrow, and it's because it's genetic. It's basically genetic stress. But when you come up to stress, your pupil's going to contract. It's going to get really tiny, and then it's going to get big, and then it's going to get really tiny. It's going to get really big, and it does that very, very, very quickly. And in doing that, it can cause these buckling of these fibers. Okay, it can cause a buckling of these fibers over generations of time, and that is what indicates a genetic tendency for tension and stress. So usually, you know, we see these in most people. Dr. Jensen had a couple of those. You know, I'll never forget when I was in his class, even as all those years ago, somebody asked him about, because he had like 2 stress rings in his or contraction furrows in his eyes, and people, you know, the students asked him why. You know, if he's this iridologist and he's, you know, using herbs and vitamins, and he knows how excuse me, he knows how to take care of himself based on his eyes, why does he have contraction furrows? And he said that everybody, and of course we laughed, everybody needs to have a couple of those just to get things done, so that we just don't sit around. Otherwise, we just sit around if we didn't have a little bit, you know, a little bit of stress. But this can also show us anxiety, stress and anxiety. So these are, like I said, they're genetic. They don't go away. What makes the eye look like it goes away is the pupil. or what makes the eye look like it changes, is the pupil. So if you think of the eye, it's like a big muscle. And the pupil is designed to, not let too much light in the eye. So when you come up to light, you look at a light, the pupil's going to contract, it's going to get very small, and so that it doesn't let too much light in to damage the eye. Well, think about it. When it does that, it pulls all of these lines in close. Okay, it's going to make everything look long. And then if you go into a dark room, what's going to happen? Your pupil's going to get very big. It's going to enlarge. And then what's going to happen? It's going to push all of these markings and holes and all of these markings here. It's going to smash them all towards the perimeter of the iris. It's going to make them look wide. Okay, so it's going to get, the pupil contracts, it makes everything look very long and skinny. And then when it expands, it's going to make everything look wide and smashed. And when people take pictures and send them in to me saying that their eyes have changed, unless you use the same lighting, the pupil's going to be a different size, which means the markings are going to be a different shape. And then also the color, because different lighting is used, then the color looks a little different too. And so right now we're really trying to get everybody to use, when you take pictures, use the same lighting in the same environment. Try to do it at the same time of day with the same camera if you can, because that way you get the same lighting, the same, so the pupil will be very close to the same size. And then we can really see if there are changes. Okay, this is called a lacuna here. This looks like a hole in the eye, doesn't it? In the iris, it looks like a little hole. This is called a lacuna. And these are actually also genetic. They don't go away, but they do show us areas that might not be absorbing nutrients really well or eliminating toxins really well. Okay, so that is an area that would need work. Okay, that's an area that that would need work, right? Something in the body that might not be as strong as it should be. Maybe it's causing symptoms, maybe it's not. Because remember, we're looking for genetic tendencies. We're looking for areas that are strong. We're looking for areas that are not so strong. Areas that are strong is not the right word. Resilient. Okay, we're looking for areas that are resilient. In other words, how resilient are you to disease, and so on. Okay, here is a really common iris sign. It's called lipemic diathesis. We used to call it a cholesterol ring. We don't call it that anymore. We call it lipemic diathesis because it has to do with fats. Okay, diathesis means being in a state of having a hereditary predisposition to a disease, and lipemic is to be in a state of having lipemia, or the presence of fats or lipids in the blood. In other words, hypercholesterolemia or high cholesterol. So this ring here, usually you can see it just from standing in front of somebody. It can be white, it can be yellow, it can be orange, it can be very, very, very light, it can be very dark, it can be very thick or very thin. It can signify high blood pressure, low blood pressure, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, but it all has to do with fats and the circulatory system, okay, and cardiovascular, anything having to do with cardiovascular. If we see this in somebody under 40, then it usually can be more serious. Notice I said usually and can. Just because we see this in the eye doesn't mean that it's a horrible thing. It's just that it's a genetic tendency. So I have seen people with this in their eye that have gone and had blood tests and their cholesterol's been fine, their triglycerides are fine, their blood pressure is fine. So why would I see this in the eye then? Because probably their mother or their father or their grandmother or their grandfather or somebody in their family had cholesterol problems. Okay, it is a tendency. Does it mean that it is going to be a problem now? Not necessarily. Chances are it might, but not necessarily. It is a genetic tendency. This does not leave the eye. It doesn't matter how many times somebody detoxes and cleanses and does chelation therapy and lowers their cholesterol and changes their diet. It doesn't leave. It's always there. It's genetic. It doesn't leave the eye. Okay, I've got all these arrows here because I'm pointing to all these different colors of pigments. You may have some of these pigments in your eye, you may not. Okay, you may know somebody that has these pigments in their eye. So these pigments, this is something that does change in the eye. Usually as we age, we get more of these pigments. Kind of like we get more age spots on our skin, we get more pigments in our eyes. So the pigments, what do they mean? Well, they usually mean, they have to do with the various organs that they're associated with. So yellow pigments usually have to do with the kidneys, okay? And orange pigments, so you can see some yellow in here. Orange pigments, here's some orange here, and orange, quite a bit of orange. Orange usually has to do with blood sugar. Could be high blood sugar, low blood sugar, okay? What that means, it could be hypoglycemia, could be diabetes. Maybe there's somebody in the family that has high blood sugar or low blood sugar, okay? This usually has to do, just know it has to do with a tendency. It's a predisposition, letting us know that there can be problems later on if there aren't already. Okay, then there's brown. Brown has to do with the liver. So when we see brown, then we suspect that there may be trouble with methylation, and there may be some gene errors. Maybe the liver's not methylating real well. So we get that checked with an MTHFR blood test. And black is usually not a good thing. Usually we see black, that can tell us that there may be problems that are kind of brewing, that may be something, maybe a problem later. So that's something that needs to be checked out. So wherever these are in the iris, this tells us that they can be causing problems, might not be, but there is a tendency. So just realize there again, we're looking at tendencies. We're looking at genetic tendencies. This is called a scurf rim, and this girl has green eyes, the beautifulest green eyes. And when I took pictures of her eyes, this is what I saw. It's like, oh my gosh, how amazing. So she has a blue eye underneath, and then she has all this yellow and orange on top. Well, if you think of color crayons and you think of a blue eye, or think of blue and then you color yellow on top, you're going to get green. So this here, this is a scurf rim. This is, remember, on the outside of your body is the skin. Well, this is on the outside. This has to do with the skin area. And so this usually tells us that maybe the skin isn't eliminating as well as it should, okay? Maybe there are skin problems, such as potential things like acne or psoriasis and eczema, okay? So there can be issues with the skin. And you'll see this if you watch TV and you watch somebody putting on mascara, a model putting on mascara, you're going to see this ring. But once I learned iridology, I could never look at models again without seeing different things. And this ring, you will see it over and over and over again. You know, people that use a lot of lotion on their skin, people that, you know, the skin just can't breathe, and the skin is the third kidney and it needs to breathe. So dry skin brushing, we usually use dry skin brushing. So tophi, we used to call this a lymphatic rosary, and these are these little spots. If you think of a rosary, then you can kind of imagine these little spots, but we call these tophi or flocculations now. This is the immune system, okay? This is where the lymph is right in here. The skin is on the outside and the lymph is right in here. We see these little spots. This is something else that changes as people get older. These can get darker. They can get more yellowed, more orangey, and we used to think that that meant toxicity. It may, but it doesn't necessarily. They can be white, and so this has to do with lymph, and it is a genetic sign. It's there at birth. It does not go away, but it can become more yellow as a person ages. So I just put a couple of pictures of pupils here since I was talking about pupils earlier. Here's your large pupils. So you can see how big these pupils are. I mean, I actually had a client that his pupils went way out here and just smashed all of the iris signs all the way out to the perimeter. But you can see these pupils are pretty big. And if you look at these, you'll see they're not the same size. So if you look at them, look at the right pupil and look at the left pupil, you can see that the right pupil is larger than the left pupil. So we look at the size of the pupil, we look at the shape of the pupil, we look to see if there's any flattenings out here around the pupil. That tells us about the spine, and it's amazing what you can learn by looking at the eyes. So much. I mean, I've spent 30 years. Actually, it's more than 30 years. It's 31 years in August. Next month, oh my gosh. Whew, it'll be 31 years I've been since I got certified by Dr. Jensen. Guess that's aging me a little bit there. Okay, small pupils. Look at this. Look at the difference. Tiny, tiny pupils. And I've even seen them smaller than this. You know, when you shine a light in the eye, the pupil's supposed to contract, but not that much. It's supposed to be about a third. You know, the pupil should be out about here. So these are really tiny pupils. And there again, when the pupils get really, really tiny like that, they pull all the markings in and make them longer. So actually this Lacuna here that I showed you earlier, if this is my father-in-law, if his pupils were big, were expanded, were enlarged, and his pupils were way out here, this Lacuna would be wide. It'd be pushed way out and it would be wide. It would look totally different than this. Totally different. So here you see small pupils. And then I put a couple pictures here of sclerology, because sclerology is a whole nother study. I mean, it's very, very complicated. Now, the benefit of sclerology is the sclera changes, okay? Where the iris does not change, the iris, the benefit of iridology is that it shows us our genetic tendencies. The benefit of sclerology is that the sclera changes, and we can see as somebody is improving their health, as they're changing their diet, as they're supplementing, or they're doing whatever they need to do to improve their health. We can see that in the sclera. So I just kind of give you a little information here, because yellow, when we see this yellow in the sclera, this has to do with liver. Okay, and so when we see this, we know, ooh, this person might need to work on their liver. They need to detox. They need to change their diet. Maybe their whole digestive system is, you know, stressed. Who knows? When we see pink, see all this pink here close to the nose, well, that usually has to do with environment. It can also have to do with irritation. So maybe they have allergies. Okay, and then we look at all of these blood vessels here. We look to see what shape they are and how they're running. You know, this one here, it looks kind of like a river. When they look like a river, they're called a meandering vessel, like a meandering brook. And that means something different than these very thick vessels here that are kind of curved back. They're called curved back on themselves vessels, or this spot here. Okay, so we look, not only do we look at the iris, but we also look at the sclera. We look at everything, because it all paints a picture. Every single person has their own story. Every single person has their own health issues. Some people are strong in some areas, and other people are weak in other areas. Some people have, you know, everybody has their own personality. Everybody has their own eye color. Everybody has their own subtypes. Everybody has their own constitution and their resiliency based on their genes, based on how they eat and sleep and what they drink and what they do and their thoughts. And, you know, I mean, there's so many factors that are involved in a person's health. So this just kind of gives you an idea of the sclerology. Okay, this comes to the end of my talk. So I just want to thank you for, I don't even know what time it is. I just want to thank you for attending today, and I'll open this up for questions. I do have a class coming up next month, and it's supposed to start August 11th. And I usually hold it Tuesday, Thursday mornings from 8 to 10 Pacific Standard Time. It's all recorded. It's available. So for instance, if you want to take the class and you're not available on Tuesday or Thursday from 8 to 10, then you can then watch the recordings and take the class and be available. We do have study groups that are going. So, you know, I'm the instructor. I teach and I record it, and then I put it in our student login, and it is there for everybody to be able to watch. You can watch it over and over again. You can download it. It all comes with the course. And so that is starting in August. And then I do private classes and group classes, and I do tutoring and all that kind of stuff. If you are a returning student, then you get a discount. We do have payment plans. You know, we do know that COVID is causing a lot of financial issues out there, and we are very flexible. So if you're interested in taking our classes, you know, I'd be happy to work with you. And so let me stop the share and see if anybody has any questions. I see there's a couple new people here, and let me take off the mute so that oh, you can already unmute yourselves. So, okay, so does anybody have any questions, any comments, anything that you want to know? I think there was something in the chat too. Uh-oh, somebody wanted me to go back to the previous slide, sorry. Okay, any questions, any comments? Oh, I'm right on time. You'll need to unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment. Irina.
Brenda, I wanted to thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, it was very interesting to listen.
You're welcome. It's a little different.
I'm so impressed that you were personally, you knew Dr. Bernard Jensen. I'm just so impressed.
That was luck. That was pure luck. You know, a lot of people get into iridology because they're interested in it and they want to learn it, you know, for business and for themselves. But I didn't know anything about it. It was because of Rochelle, because, you know, she was having all those problems and I was having problems. And so it just, you know, it just kind of happened. It just kind of progressed.
Yeah,
and I was very lucky.
Iridology is so amazing.
Iridology is very amazing.
I am an esthetician, and you know, at the same time when I had my iridology practice 10 years ago, after you certified me, I incorporated Oriental face reading or face mapping with iridology because of the restrictions in Florida on iridology.
Mm-hmm.
But at least I could say a few things to people when I was doing facial mapping or Oriental face reading,
Right.
because that was legal.
Right, right. Yeah, I have a story about one of my students in Florida that he was he had a white coat on. He would put on a white coat, and he sent me a picture of himself with a white coat, a doctor's coat. And I told him, I said, you better not do that. You're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. And sure enough, he got nailed. They were going to shut him down. Luckily, he was going for his Chinese licensing, and IPA was able to help him. So that's another benefit of IPA, is that they will back you up, and they were able to help him, and so they didn't shut him down. But you know, you got to be careful not to diagnose and not to pretend to be a doctor when you're not a doctor, you know.
Yeah, well, you know,
in
your course, you basically taught us to say either historically known or weaknesses. So if you say historically known, or if you say there is a weakness but you can strengthen your weaknesses, it's not diagnosis. So I kind of trained myself to do from your course these two words. And
right.
yeah,
And
they won't get you into trouble.
It has changed even more since then. Iridology, since you took my course a long time ago. Now I'm doing the IPA
2010.
courses.
2010.
Oh, jeez, that's 10 years ago. Yes,
Yeah.
you need brushing up so you can learn the current research, because that's, that was 10 years ago. There's so much change. There's so many people out there doing research. There's someone in Italy that's doing cardiovascular research from the eye, and there's so much research going on, and iridology has changed so much. So even saying weakness, we don't even say that anymore. We don't even use those words. We don't say weakness. We say resiliency, and we talk about density and things like that. We don't even use those words. So that's just a simple change that happens in that amount of time. So, okay, any other questions? Any other comments? Okay, well then I'm going to end the meeting. And thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate everyone being here tonight. Everybody have a great night.
Thank you.